It was a cold December night, and the winds howled outside as I sat alone in the house. Little did I know, the storm would bring more than just snow. I was 17 at the time, and every year just before Christmas, my mom had to go on a 3-day business trip. Being an only child, it meant I spent those days alone at home. Normally she'd leave just before winter break, so I'd still be at school. But this year, she left the same day the school let out for the holidays. The house was mine for the next 3 days. The storm was intense. The snow had been coming down since morning, but by the time my mom left, it was almost blizzard level. The wind whipped against the house, and the trees outside swayed dangerously. The heavy blanket of snow made the world feel oddly muffled, like the outside and inside were separated by some unseen force. I made myself some food, then found a new movie to watch. I tried to relax, but the wind kept picking up, and the sounds outside became more ominous, louder. Every time I looked outside, the storm was worse. More snow, more wind, the trees bending under the weight. It felt like the house was holding its breath. Around 7 or 8 p.m., I heard the crunching of snow outside my door. At first, I thought it was just the wind shifting, but then I heard coughing, sharp and rough, followed by slow, deliberate footsteps. I froze. Who would be out there in this kind of weather? I muted the movie and listened, heart pounding. The steps grew louder as someone approached the porch. I could hear their breath coming in bursts, as if they were struggling against the cold. Then, nothing. I waited, feeling uneasy, my fingers gripping the remote tightly. Should I open the door? I waited another minute or two, but no one knocked. The silence stretched and my nerves tightened. Something didn't feel right. Slowly I got up and tiptoed to the door. I opened the peephole. Nothing. The footsteps had stopped right at my door, but there was no one in sight. Confused, I stepped back and looked out the window, scanning the area for any signs. The snowstorm was thick, and the porch was completely empty, yet I could see the deep impressions of the footprints leading up to my door, then turning back, retracing their steps. I couldn't explain it. It didn't make sense. I could have sworn I heard someone there. After a few more minutes, I tried to shrug it off. Maybe the snowstorm was playing tricks on me, making sounds seem closer or further away. I went back to the couch and tried to distract myself with my phone, but something nagged at me. I kept hearing the wind pick up in strange bursts, followed by another jarring thump. At 11 p.m., the power flickered and then completely cut out. A few moments later, I heard a loud thump against the house, like something had hit it. I froze. The wind howled again, deafening. The house felt so still, too still. The power still hadn't come back on, and my phone had no signal. As I stood there trying to figure out what caused the noise, I saw something that made my blood run cold. At the back door, a figure stood in the shadows. The back porch light wasn't on, so he was mostly hidden, just his face peering through the darkened glass. His eyes were wide, unblinking. His breath fogged up the window. "Hey kid, would you get the door for me? It's freezing out here," he said, his voice low, almost muffled by the storm. I stared at him, my heart thumping in my chest. I didn't know who he was. He didn't look familiar, and something about the way he spoke unsettled me. He was too calm for someone supposedly stranded in the storm. "Kid, get the door, please." His voice became more insistent, but his expression never changed. I wanted to scream, but my body felt paralyzed. Something wasn't right. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I backed away slowly, retreating into the hallway as he tried the door handle. His hand rested on the knob, his fingers pressed hard against it, as if testing how much pressure it would take to force the door open. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. My heart raced as I tried desperately to maintain a signal. After several attempts, I finally got through long enough to tell the dispatcher what was happening. Meanwhile, the man at the door had started banging on the glass, his face twisted into an angry frown. "Open the door," he yelled. The knock was louder now, forceful. His fist pounded against the door several times. I ran back into the living room, my hands shaking as I kept my phone close. I watched through the hallway window as the man stepped back, still watching, still waiting. After what felt like an eternity, he turned and disappeared into the storm. The police didn't arrive until nearly half an hour later, the snowstorm causing major delays. They didn't find anything, no sign of the man, no traces of what he was up to, but I knew he wasn't just some stranded traveler. I couldn't shake the feeling that he had been watching me, waiting for something. I was exhausted from a long drive, barely 30 minutes away from the next town, when I spotted a man standing beside a car. Was he in need of help, or was this the beginning of something far worse? I had been driving for hours, crossing miles of empty roads through a relentless snowstorm. It had started lightly enough, but the further I went, the worse the weather got. By the time I was 3 hours from home, the storm had intensified, heavy snow swirling in the headlights, making it difficult to see anything past a few feet. There were hardly any other cars on the road. The isolation was eerie, and it made me feel uneasy, but I kept driving, hoping to make it home that night. I was determined, but also growing more exhausted. Just as the last hints of daylight faded and the night sky settled in, I saw something ahead. Through the blizzard, I noticed a car stopped on the side of the road. Its hazard lights were blinking erratically. A man stood beside the car, waving his arms. The sight was odd, but the closer I got, the more I could tell that he wasn't moving. I slowed down, my heart pounding in my chest. It was freezing outside and the snow was falling heavier now. I didn't want to stop, but the man's car was blocking most of the road, and there was no way to pass without getting stuck. I pulled up behind him, parking a safe distance away. He waved eagerly as I rolled down the window. "Hey, can you help me? My car's stuck," he said, his voice carrying a faint accent, almost as if he didn't speak English fluently. His tone sounded desperate. I felt a knot in my stomach, but I reluctantly agreed to help. I could barely see his face, just his shadow against the thick snow. The wind was so intense that it felt like my breath was being stolen by the cold. I stepped out of my car, the snow biting my skin as I quickly made my way to the back of his vehicle. He was still in the car, searching for something. "Can you hurry?" I shouted, trying to push the icy feeling from my bones. Something felt off, but I couldn't quite place it. A moment later, he stepped out of the car. "Sorry, I was looking for my gloves," he said with a forced laugh, but his eyes didn't quite match his tone. They were wide, like he was nervous, or maybe even scared. He smiled too quickly, the expression almost unnatural. His demeanor shifted. There was something about his posture now, rigid, unsettling, like he wasn't quite who he had been moments before. My gut twisted. "Are you okay?" I asked, trying to push the uneasy feeling aside. "I'm fine," he replied, but the way he said it didn't match his wide-eyed stare. He stepped closer to me, his face too close now, and suddenly his smile dropped. His eyes lost all warmth, and I realized with a sickening lurch in my stomach, he wasn't alone. I felt a chill creep up my spine. Without thinking, I bolted for my car, heart pounding as I slammed the door shut. Just as I locked the door, I saw movement. 3 more men appeared from behind the vehicle, rushing toward me, their faces hidden by the storm. I floored the gas pedal, my car skidding through the snowbank as I barely made it around them. The fear clawed at my chest as I raced away, not daring to look back. I thought the noise on the roof was nothing more than the snow settling, until I found tracks through my house that didn't belong to me. It was late November, the first snow of the season, but the storm felt different this time. It wasn't just the snow, it was the way the wind howled at night, like a warning, sending icy shivers down my spine. I didn't think much of it until I started hearing strange sounds coming from above. At first I thought it was just the wind, shifting the snow or settling against the roof, but the sounds were rhythmic, too rhythmic. It was like someone was walking across the roof. I tried to ignore it, but when the noise returned each night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was always the same, a quiet shuffling above me, followed by a thud, and then silence. One night I woke up to the unmistakable sound of a window sliding open. My blood ran cold. I rushed out of bed, barely able to see through the dark, but I was sure I had heard it. I crept to the window, peering out into the blackness. Nothing. But when I stepped back inside the house, I noticed something even worse. There were footprints in the fresh snow inside the house, scattered across the living room. The worst part, they weren't mine. My heart stopped. Someone had been inside my house. They were close, too close.